So I'm scrolling through Twitter the other day, and I've come across a recent debate on for the people buckle up and whether or not it's overpowered. And that's not what this video is about. The reason I bring it up is because there has been this kind of points of contention of people arguing back and forth about whether or not slugging is a big enough issue that the devs need to finally step up and step in and take care of it, or whether or not survivors are just being whiny little bitches and it doesn't happen that often. And then there's a lot of discussions about whether or not slugging is the game's fault, or whether or not it's the killer's fault, or whether or not it's the survivor's fault because they didn't play right or run the right perks. Or there is tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of discussions around it. And when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to make this video on regarding that, I didn't know if I was going to dig deep and compile all the tweets or whatnot. So what I ended up deciding to do was actually to talk about slugging as a whole and whether or not I think it's a problem, and if it is a problem, how I think it can be fixed. If you're interested in my opinion on For the People Buckle Up, I think it's an absolutely busted combo, but I personally have not run into it a bunch. So I'm just going to assume it's a rare busted combo that not a lot of people use. In any case, I also wanted to go ahead and tell you guys that when I say slugging in this video, I have a different definition of slugging than most of the community does. To me, there is a distinct difference between slugging, where you leave a survivor on the ground while you go take care of another task, break a pallet, kick a gen, chase another survivor, scout the area, etc., and forced bleed outs. Forced bleed outs are, in my opinion, the bigger problem. And that's normally what people are talking about when they mention slugging, is the killer knocking all four survivors or knocking the remaining survivors, whoever that may be, and then standing there and playing with their dicks and fucking watching reruns of Grey's Anatomy and doing that weird humping motion. By the way, I just want to fucking say it. If you do that humping motion, you are cringe. You are one of the most cringe human beings on the planet, and you don't need to loudly announce through a microphone that you have no friends or bitches, because we all already know that from your behavior. But that to me is what people are thinking about when they say slugging. I differentiate the two, but for the purpose of this video, I'm going to use slugging the way the rest of you use it. So that's what I'm talking about. And by the way, if you take a shot every time I say the word slugging, you'll be intoxicated by the end of this video. In any case, so the three problems that were the 3 points that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. Is slugging the fault of the game, the killer, or the survivor? Let's start with the game. Obviously, there is no anti-slugging mechanics in place. There is not even so much as a surrender button. If you get slugged, you either have to DC or you have to wait a full 4 fucking minutes for the bleed out timer to come across. And that, in my opinion, is dog shit. Now, I know, because somebody's going to bring it up, I know that in the way back when, around the time I first started, I think it was actually, was it the Knights PTB? It was either the Knights PTB or it was the PTB before the Knights. But it was around the time I started. Behavior tried to introduce an anti-slugging mechanic, which in my opinion was way too overly complicated, and that's why people didn't like it. And I know that a lot of my viewers are scoffing right now because I am the fucking king of overcomplicating things whenever I try to make new mechanics and solutions. Trust me, I understand. But the way it worked was survivors could pick themselves up off the ground after either 35 or 45 seconds. I couldn't remember which one. It was one of those two. And if all 4 survivors ended up on the ground, the game would immediately end. Like, immediately, it would be over. The last survivor would get moried. Boom. If 3 survivors were on the hook and then you knock the last survivor down, immediately moried, game over, boom. And then they were going to rework the mories into some bullshit blood point bonuses, which kind of fucking irritates the crap out of me because, well, we'll talk about that later. In any case, I think that the problem that with that whole system was that they were trying to make a change for survivors' benefit, but they wanted to give the killer something in return in order to make the killer feel like they didn't miss out. And I say this as a killer main, fuck the killers. Here's how I would have handled it. every single survivor can pick themselves up off the ground after, say, 50 seconds of being slugged. And then when they pick themselves off the ground, they get base kit borrowed time, and the killer is hindered by 20% for 5 seconds. So the base kit borrowed time for 5 seconds, hindered by 20% for 5 seconds. That way, a killer can't slug you, stand over you for 50 seconds, let you pick yourself back up, and then re-knock you immediately to the ground. That's how I would have done it. That would have been literally the only thing I would have done. That would have solved a shitload of problems. And I'm really sad that Behavior gave up on the concept, but you know, because they took all the criticism for the PTB and they're like, fine, we're just not going to implement it in what I like to call taking your ball and going home move. Whereas if they would have just kept trying, I'm sure they would have figured it out eventually that the killers didn't need a compensation for this change. Because if you slug someone, right, if you knock someone to the ground and they're down there for 50 plus seconds, that is your fault. That is your problem, right? Very rarely will 50 seconds on the ground ever happen, and it is not you as the killer fucking up. I should also mention that the hinder that I mentioned would happen if the killer was within, like, I don't know, 10 meters of you picking yourself up or something like that. You know, I think it would be fucking stupid if the killer knocked you down, slugged you, and then decided they wanted to chase the Michaela, and then you got up across the map and the killer just suddenly got hindered. I think that'd be dumb, but you get my point. Because I know somebody would have brought it up in the comments. Is slugging Behavior's fault? In a way, yes. Because there's nothing for this, there's nothing to counteract it. There's no surrender mechanic. There's no faster. Like, I was thinking for the longest time, what if there was a faster bleed out where the more you crawled, the faster your bleed out timer? So if the killer was just trying to leave you on the ground for 4 minutes, you could just start crawling and it would go down faster or something like that. The next point is it the killer's fault? Because a lot of people are arguing that, dude, it's the killer's decision. The killer is the one that goes out of their way to knock all the survivors and sit there and let the game end. Yes, it's the killer's fault too. Let's be completely honest with ourselves, guys. The killer at the end of the fucking day is the asshole who is making the decision to do this play. And before any killer mains, any of my fellow killer mains try to jump in the comments and be like, oh, well, it's a valuable strategy to win. No, a valuable strategy would be to knock all 4 survivors and then start hooking them. There's a distinct difference between I have all 4 survivors knocked, I am now hooking each one of them, and I have all 4 survivors knocked. I'm now going to sit here and watch the entirety of Charmed on Amazon Prime while they bleed out. Like, there's a distinct difference there. Don't try to bullshit me. I am one of the first people to argue that sometimes playing like an asshole is the only way for you to win, or sometimes it is your only option at the time. I am the first one to stand up and say that sometimes tunneling, slugging, and camping are necessary in order to win the game. I will defend that shit to the days that I die. But fucking leaving all 4 people down on the ground for 4 minutes is just not a fucking strategy. It's just not. You're just being a dick. At least own up to it. I'll respect you a tiny bit more, which is about the same amount of respect that I give to the dirt on my boots, but hey, at least you're not the shit on my boots, huh? Finally, is it the survivor's fault? Sometimes, yeah. See, this is something that I know a lot of people, this is the part of the video where I feel like a lot of people, I hear their buttholes clenching in. So here's the thing. I have been a proponent from the very first time I started playing this game that sometimes things that survivors complain about is their own fucking fault. I've made at least one video on this where people do not ever want to blame themselves. I even made a joke about it on stream, where somebody was like, hey, Kaiser, what are we going to do today? And I was like, oh, I'm going to pretend like I'm good at this game, and I'm going to blame literally everything else when I fail. I am never bad. It is always the survivors. It's always the killer. It's always the game. It's always bullshit. Oh my God, bro. Because people just don't like to admit that they're bad at video games. And I want to tell you right now, like, I'm not on a moral high ground here. I'm not sitting here like, you filthy peasants won't admit you're bad. I do the same shit, bro. We all do. Everybody, every single gamer at some point, something will happen. They'll lose a game or they'll lose an engagement or something like that, and they'll go, ah, fuck, it's the game. Ah, fuck, it's the enemy. Ah, fuck, it's cheap weapons. Ah, fuck, it's Tuesday, right? Ah, fuck, I didn't masturbate this morning or some shit like that, right? Everybody does it, right? So I'm not pretending like I don't do it. I'm just saying that a little bit more self-awareness can sometimes help out a lot. And it does help out a lot. Whenever I actually like clear my mind and realize how I'm playing badly, I don't get angry as often. Like when I'm ready to blame myself for being bad, you'll find me a lot more chill. You'll find me a lot more relaxed. And I think that that's one of the big problems that I have with people whenever they aren't honest with themselves, because at the end of the day, there is stuff that you can do to counteract slugging. You can be a lot smarter about the way that you engage the people who are slugged. You could be a lot smarter about your positioning as a survivor. Sure, you're not always going to get that opportunity. I understand that. But sometimes there is. Sometimes you guys need to get, like, just have a little bit more patience. Like, I've seen four-man slugging instances where if the survivors had just hid for just a short while longer, just a little bit longer, they would have been able to run over and one-tap the other survivors, pick them all up immediately. Everybody could have scattered, reset, found med kits, etc., right? One thing I don't like whenever it comes to this discussion is people bringing up perks, right? This goes all the way back to that For the People buckle up thing that people were talking about earlier, because that's a really good anti-slugging perk. And then, of course, you have stuff like Flip-Flop, Tenacious, Plot Twist. You have a bunch of other stuff to pick yourself up off the ground. Boon Exponential, if you want to run that. So a lot of people have been like, oh, but there's perks to counter slugging. If you're having a bad time with slugging, just run this perk. And I hate that argument. I hate that argument from the very bottom of my heart. I think that trying to use perks as an excuse for bad game balance or bad game mechanics is bad, right? Like back in the day before we got the FOV slider, people were like, well, just use Shadowborn if you want a higher FOV. I should not have to sacrifice perk slots to counter bad game design. That is not what perks are for. That is not, perks are there to enhance our game, not fucking fix it. So yeah, that's my, that's how I feel. It is, at the end of the day, it is dependent on the situation. It's always the game's fault at the end of the day for not having an anti-slugging mechanic. The killer is always the one that decides to actually four-man slug bleed out. But sometimes you as the survivor need to understand that there are things you can do. You just need to play things a little bit more patiently and a little bit more smartly. And again, I think slugging is a problem, but I don't see it happen that often. Even when I was on my like survivor craze where I played like probably 80% survivor to 20% killer, I didn't run into four-man slugging that often. I probably ran into it once every like 40, 50, 60 games, if that. And most of the time it wasn't as bad as it seemed to be. So I don't think it's like a massive problem, but I do think that behavior needs to implement something to counteract it so that there's less motivation for killers to do it. But that's all I have for you guys today. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments. As always, I'm not just here to spout my opinion at you. I'm here to listen to your thoughts on the subject as well. I might not always get to respond to everybody, but I do read as many comments as I can. So go ahead and leave your thoughts down below. And as always, a special thank you to my channel members, Nuclear Bomb, Cat Lover, and Spirit Upgrades for their additional support. If you want to find out how to become a channel member today and get perks like viewing videos early and merch discount codes, then please click that join button down below. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in the next one.